Radio Free Santa Clarita presents The Talk of Santa Clarita, a podcast about issues involving Santa Clarita and the surrounding valley. Episode 122, Congresswoman Katie Hill. And now, let's see what the Talk of Santa Clarita is.
And remember, this is for posterity, so be honest.
All right, Katie, thank you so much for coming in and doing this today.
No problem.
I mean, let me correct myself. Congresswoman Katie
Hill.
You are a rock star now.
Thank you. That's probably a bit of an overstatement, but I appreciate it.
But, I was actually listening to, the first podcast we did together. This is our sixth time together.
I know. I was thinking about it. I was like, this is the place where it started. You were the first press that I ever did. And, I told Cassie about it today. I was like, going back and listening to those older podcasts is going to be pretty rough to listen to.
Do you remember what I said to you after the podcast, though? Do you remember?
I think you said that I was going to win.
I said you could win.
Oh,
now,
okay.
I didn't know you would.
Okay. Well, I interpreted it as I was going to win. So.
Yeah, but it was quite impressive. Now, I do have to tell you, though, I'm excited about the fact you won, but I do have a bone to pick with you.
Oh, do tell.
Okay. Let's get serious for a second. This is the Cohen hearings. Mm-hmm. Some of the questions you ask. I feel like you missed a question.
Okay.
Okay. Let me give you an example of what I think you should have said. Mr. Cohen, let's role play this. Okay, you be Cohen. Okay. Does Mr. Trump listen to the Talk of Santa Clarita podcast?
My bad. So sorry.
And is he aware that it is the original podcast exclusively about Santa Clarita and the surrounding valley?
I really should have asked that. I'm
headlines.
Very sorry.
I'm telling you, headlines.
I know. I missed it. I missed the boat.
Let's get those plugs in, okay?
Yep. I'll work on it.
I do appreciate you wearing the shirt, though.
Yeah, no problem. I'm excited.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's get serious. Man, things have changed since we first met. Has everything been kind of a whirlwind for you? I mean, it's...
It has very much been a whirlwind. That's pretty much the only way you can describe it, I think.
Really? Why do you say that?
Well, I mean, you really don't get any time off whatsoever. You're flying back and forth across the country pretty much every week. So much has happened. I think this would be a crazy time in our politics to begin with, but you're also, I'm on 3 committees, which is a lot. One of which is one of the most high-profile committees. The other is Armed Services, which has so much going on. It would, in any time, but we've also got decisions around pulling troops out, and we've got a changing and potentially really threatening shift in world order, and it's a ton to adjust to. I'm on leadership. I've got a whole bunch of different assignments, and you
just recently got back from Munich.
Yeah, that was a wake-up call.
You have been on national television now so many times that I can't even count. I mean, I not to knock Congressman Knight in any way, I just never saw him on television. Yeah. And it seems like every time I turn on the TV, there you are. I don't watch Fox News, but my father watches Fox News, and he called to say, I saw Katie Hill on Fox News.
I've made a few Fox appearances.
Yeah. I'm curious about... we're going to talk policy a little bit here later, but I am kind of curious what it's like being you right now. You know what I mean? And the lifestyle in general. For example, the TV appearances. Mm-hmm. Is that a conscious choice on your part, or are they seeking you out?
They're definitely seeking me out. We have to be pretty selective in terms of just which ones. We only pick the really. I mean, I don't mean to make this sound like I don't know, I'm too good for anything else, but we pretty much have to take the big ones and the more primetime ones, just because it's pretty time consuming to do a TV appearance, and so we've got to make sure that it's one that's going to reach a pretty big audience if I'm going to take the time away from the job to do it. And for me, when I'm doing it, it's because I feel like there's something important that needs to get across to a broader audience. I think especially because I have a perspective that is reflective of a middle part of the country that I think this district represents, that I don't think is often really spoken to.
Yeah.
So, when the reason I go on both Fox and MSNBC is to kind of try and bring that perspective, and hopefully, try to say that this shouldn't be as much of a polarizing political issue, whatever that issue is, whether it's border security all the way to this Cohen stuff. And I think that we've got to try and bring that tone back, and it's not easy in this kind of a political environment.
CNN, after the Cohen hearing, called you a star in the making.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
No.
How does that make you feel when you hear something like that? I mean, and from what I understand, Trump himself said that he's been watching you, which is a little creepy.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the feeling when you hear things like that about yourself?
I think it's definitely weird. It's also, I'm just always very conscious of the sort of pressure that's on in terms of you do have not just, it's enough when you've got the people here of this district watching you, but you definitely have the whole nation watching you. And arguably a big swath of the world watching. I mean, the Cohen questioning that had a worldwide audience in a huge way. So I think that's a strange feeling, but it's also, we have to do good. Like, the whole point of me going was to be able to accomplish something. And it's tough because we're in a spot where, I said this in my opening statement, at Oversight, is that I didn't want to be doing this. Going on to Oversight is not the committee to go on if I wanted just to be reelected here in this kind of a district. It's a polarizing committee. It's one that's going to be really heavily watched, and where I'm going to have to make some decisions that can look very political and partisan. And but I feel very strongly that it's a duty that and an obligation I have to take on. So I think that it's, but at the same time, I promised that I would work on healthcare. I promised that I would work on, getting big money out of politics, on education and on housing and on all of these other things. And I can't, you can't stop that. You can't stop the forward motion. And arguably, we have to get the ball rolling on those things again. But at the same time, we are dealing with what I would say is a crisis in our democracy on a number of different fronts. So it's kind of trying to compartmentalize that and be able to deliver to the best of my ability.
Were you? I love the fact that you're posting these videos of yourself and talking about where you are and what's going on each time and things like that. I really found it amusing when you were talking about seeing Nancy Pelosi in San Francisco and at the airport and kind of bumping into her, and I'm you're kind of like part of the new guard. It's with AOC and which she's a buddy of yours, I guess. Is she? Are you friends with her?
It's funny because you don't have a lot of time to hang out with really anybody.
Well, the perception I think a lot of people have is that you guys sit around and do break law, make laws and then go out and have a beer together. I haven't had a beer with any of my colleagues. Really?
No, the only person I really see in any kind of lengthy period of time is Lauren, who's my roommate. And that's like you get home at 10 or 11 o'clock at night and you're like decompress about the day for 20 minutes before you both pass out. But it's pretty lonely, to be honest with you, because you don't, there's literally no time. You go from 7 o'clock in the morning, you get up and your day definitely starts by about 8 and it goes, you have obligations usually until about 10 o'clock. And so you get home and you're just exhausted, and there's no socializing in there. If you're doing something social, it's for a particular purpose. And so if you go out for drinks, let's say, it's like for a reception that's to accomplish something, or you're having a meeting and you happen to be able to get dinner or a drink.
Are you coming home every weekend now, or?
Most weekends, if there's a very short turnaround. So for example, if we have votes on a Friday and then again on a Monday, it goes till pretty late on a Friday and then starts again early on a Monday, then I'll stay. But that's only happened twice.
How's your husband Kenny handling it?
I mean, it's hard. It's hard to, not see each other as much, but we kind of got used to not seeing each other as much during the campaign.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So I would say it's not necessarily as different, but one thing that I think is a little bit better, at least as far as I'm concerned, I don't know if he agrees or not, is that at least now when I'm gone, there's not an expectation that I'll I'll see you, right? Like, I think when we were campaigning, you were just always gone, but it felt like I should at least be home sometimes.
Yeah.
But now and I think I do see him more on the weekends that I am home than I did when I was campaigning. So,
did you get a little? I mean, being a political junkie myself, I mean, I can't help but think about the fact that you are cavorting with political rock stars in general. You know, I mean, did you get a little starstruck meeting Nancy Pelosi or you know, Trump or the president? You know, I'd say Obama in that case, but you know.
Well, it's funny because I think I got sort of desensitized to that during the campaign too, because you got these heavyweights who came out and campaigned for us. So I met Obama twice, I think, during the campaign. I actually haven't seen him since I got elected. I now see, you know, Speaker Pelosi every single day. I got to travel to Munich with her, which was pretty amazing.
Is she on your phone?
She is on my phone. Yeah.
Let's call her.
No, because you don't do that. You have to have a pretty distinct reason, and usually she calls you, not me.
Okay, all right. Well,
but
can I have her number?
Nope. But yeah, there's I mean, it's strange because what I think is really great about it, but also very humbling, is that you're not treated as you know, some kind of inferior, right? You're treated as a peer by these people who have been doing it for decades, and
you're not experiencing ageism or sexism or anything right now. I mean,
I would say that it's I think I've broken through a lot of that, and I don't know if that's the case for all of my colleagues. I think it's. But what you see it in is more of kind of an initial reaction, and then once people get to know you, you overcome it. But like, I'll often in the halls get mistaken as a staffer, right?
Really?
So all the time. People come into my office and they're like, "Can I see Katie Hill?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." So that'll be something. I mean, that's something that's kind of funny. But there's, but I think once and I've gotten to know a lot of my colleagues. I mean, certainly on the Democratic side, I've gotten to know, you know, the majority of them, at least the ones on my committee, and that you interact. I mean, this is a ton of people, right? 435 people is a lot. To get to know. But yeah, I don't experience it too much. I think, again, I guess I would say the way that you experience it too is, my God, some of the guys of a certain age range say very inappropriate things, not meaning to. You can tell it's not meaning to. I think it's something that happens in like broader society too.
No, I am working on that. I mean, like, I have a tendency to, even with you, like, want to say, "Hey, how you doing, darling?" Because I'm from the South and I'm used to that. And it's meant as a term of endearment, but it's sexist. And I'm working on that. So I'm trying to find exactly. I think Congresswoman is the appropriate one now. But no, I
mean, it's that kind of thing, and it's like jokes that are inappropriate, or you know, just comments on your appearance where you're just like face palm so much. And I've had a few where I've actually said something just to like this is for your own good, because I don't want you to have to get taken down by something like this in this kind of an era.
Exactly. I did think it was interesting. I won't call them out, but it was on. Do you get on Facebook at all anymore? No. Someone pointed out, or a Republican person, conservative, Knight supporter, was groaning that you wore purple at the Cohen hearing. And I thought,
why would you have a problem with that? That's weird.
But I thought that was funny, you know, that you know, to even point that out, like, and to think about what you're wearing and things like that. Has it been a bit of a challenge to be accessible to people now that I mean, I think it was great. Your people were great about doing this, and you were great when I ran into you at the Super Bowl party, and you're totally up for doing it. But I mean, has it been difficult to try and stay in touch with people?
I mean, time management is the hardest part of the job, I would say, because you know, I think not just in, you know, you think about it, right, in terms of the work, right, with 3 committees. By the way, those committees often meet at the same time, especially because you've got the subcommittees. So there's 3 main committees that you have the main committee hearings for, and then I have 5 subcommittees within those. And they don't exactly coordinate with each other or necessarily care about when the hearings are. So you're often in a day, you're bouncing from one to the other. They're happening simultaneously, and you've got to decide which one's more important in that moment. And so, you know, you realize how I don't want to use the word unfairly because it sounds like kind of sanctimonious, but the way that we attack other politicians, like from the outside, I have a whole new perspective on, because you'll see these things where they take a picture of the name and they're like, they don't even go to committee hearings. Yeah. It's like, no, they probably do.
I didn't know they hold them. You would
they're all. Because there's so many,
Yeah.
So you're literally just bouncing around from one to the other. And I mean, I don't know, maybe some of the more senior members or the ones in safe seats don't bother. I do know a lot of people bail on certain things to go do call time, which I think that's another time challenge that
you doing call? You have to do the call time, which is for people that don't know that is.
When to do that. Yeah,
you literally
we're fundraising now. Yeah, we have to fundraise now. I'm trying to figure out when to work it in. It's been
you literally have to cross the street to another building. And
which
make
is
phone calls,
which is one of the hardest parts too, right? Like you can't just say, okay, I've got an hour right now between things, which you don't really ever have, but let me do a few calls right now.
Yeah.
You have to leave the building, and to do that, those buildings are big. So and by the way, this is a stupid thing to even think about, but walking in high heels is it's a huge place to walk in high heels. And my feet are always killing me, and so the thought of walking across the street is I have not figured out the shoe situation yet. Yeah. I was actually just looking at Angela actually was telling me about shoes that it's something we talk about, the women talk about a lot, is figuring out the shoes to try
Chuck
and wear.
Taylors.
And well, I know, I mean, honestly, you're thinking maybe I just will start wearing not, traditionally appropriate shoes, because my feet are killing me all the time. But anyway, back to crossing the street and stuff. There's, it's not worth it to go 15 minutes, because it takes pretty much 15 minutes to walk anywhere.
Right.
And then do some calls and then come 15 minutes back.
Right.
And so it's it's an ongoing battle of trying to figure out how to raise the money that we need to, because we're looking at raising. I mean, right now we only have a year left until the primary again, and this is
at this point you had declared.
Yep.
So
almost there, March 8th. Was
it March 8th?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I think you told me at the end of February.
Yep.
So it is. And the Republicans this is going to be toward the end here, but the Republicans haven't announced anybody that they're going to run against you yet.
Yeah.
Do you know of anybody that they're talking about?
No.
You worried?
No. I mean, if we're getting into the sort of political strategy, you certainly never take it kind of for granted.
Right.
I personally think that, if I'm looking at this from the angle of any of the Republicans out here, the stronger Republicans, I wouldn't do it in 2020. I would wait till 2022, because, we're going to have redistricting. This could potentially become a much more conservative district again. And 2020 is going to be a year where we have high turnout, probably. Presidential years always are. And this is a district where, the higher the turnout, the better Democrats do, which is usually how it is. But this is certainly one where that's the case.
Well, I'll give you an inside secret that I was told from a certain Republican up in the ranks, that exactly what you said.
Yeah.
If they're established and they think they might have a shot at it, they're not going to run in 2020.
Exactly. Because then if you lose, it's harder to come back and say, I mean, it's kind of like a mark on your record. So, we'll probably have some. But you also, you need to think of this as a real race, because I'm still a newbie, right? And I need to show my track record. I need to have a really strong showing in 2020, so that come 2022, when it's going to be a tougher election, I have to basically defend a track record in 2020, and then be able to kind of lean on that for the next time and become a known figure, and so on and so forth.
I want to talk a little bit about getting your committees that you're on, and you're backing of Nancy Pelosi as Speaker. I wasn't surprised by that, because at the debate we held back in April, I asked you about ageism or just and the idea of new leadership, and you called me out on it. You said that's almost sexist, and so I mean you were kind of had no problem with Nancy Pelosi back then.
Yeah.
But there have been a lot of I watch Facebook constantly for criticisms on politics, and there have been a lot of people that are saying that you are kowtowing to Nancy Pelosi, that you of course are just you're getting in line with the old school Democrats and not being your own person. How do you want to respond to that? I mean,
I would say that it doesn't work like that. First of all, there's not there's not a line. You know what I mean? You don't have somebody who's kind of over your shoulder saying you must vote this way, right? And in fact, I would say it's the opposite, where they have a very strong motivation to make sure you get reelected.
Yeah.
Because when on the votes that matter, we are principally aligned anyway, right? Like I ran saying that I'm going to vote such and such way on, like HR 8, for example, the background checks that we just voted on. I was going to vote that way, period, right?
Yeah.
And on, healthcare reforms, I was going to vote that way. I campaigned on that. So those things we're aligned on no matter what. So they want to make sure that you get reelected, and to get reelected, they say, vote your district. Know what, you know what's best for your district, and sometimes that's going to mean breaking with the party. But on the more important votes, the ones where we really need to get something that matters through, then they're gonna they're gonna know you're with them, right? So I am part of leadership though, so I'm helping to. I'm not following. I'm actually helping to set the agenda and helping to provide feedback into legislation that is potentially going to be more challenging for not just my district, but districts like mine and even more conservative ones, because there's that constant balance of this is a pretty middle Democratic district, even, right? Like Hillary won our district by a pretty solid margin, but it's been held by a Republican for a long time. But if you look at the spectrum of districts that are now held by Democrats, but used to be held by Republicans, we've got Democrats in districts that Trump won by 16 points. So they have to be that much more careful about their record, and they're thinking about every single vote and what percentage, like they're literally hitting refresh on their voting percentage to see how much they're voting with the establishment, because they know that's what's going to be used against them. Right. And they have to worry about 2020 in a way that I don't, because the higher the turnout for them, the harder it's going to be, right? Yeah. Potentially. Yeah. And there's so many unknowns with 2020 because it's Trump, right? So, the thing that I just vote the way that I feel like I is right, and it's right now, especially being on leadership and
Did you ever doubt voting for Pelosi as Speaker?
I would say I doubted it early on, before I knew her and before I kind of knew the dynamics. So when I was campaigning in the early stages, I was one of those people who was like, oh, she's been there forever. She's not necessarily in touch with the current, whatever, new generation, blah, blah, blah. And I felt very strongly that we do need to look at politics in a new way. But as I got to know her throughout the campaign trail, and especially once I got there, I realized, like, she's trying, as far as I'm concerned, to kind of make that handoff, right? Like she's said that she's 78 years old. Like she doesn't want to be there.
Well, it seemed like a good trade-off of the idea of I'm going to do this for 4 years and then step down and let someone else do it.
And man, by being there, you also realize, like, that institutional knowledge is so important. There are so many nuances to it. You cannot just switch that out. And I think anyone who's once you're in leadership, like, there's so much to learn, and it takes a long time to get to the level of kind of sophistication of legislating that I think needs to happen at leadership, and bringing in young, fresh faces, like mine, and like Joe Neguse, my other co-representative, and we've got a whole bunch of different kind of leadership opportunities, and a lot of young people, or younger and newer generations of people who are kind of working their way up through the ranks. And there's people in high positions of leadership who've only been in Congress for a few terms. Then it provides this balance, but you don't see those people saying, like, I want to be Speaker right now, because they know they don't have that experience, and experience counts for a lot. So I think I'm learning so much from her and from, Steny Hoyer and Clyburn and, all of these people, every single person I just have so much respect for them.
One of the other criticisms, I guess, or suspect that people have said was that there was a barter, a trade-off of your position, that your support for Nancy Pelosi allowed for you to be on the Oversight Committee as vice chair, and some of the other committee positions that you're on, that you basically supported her based on the idea that you would get, something like the Oversight Committee.
Well, my argument to that would be, how many people voted for her?
Yeah, that's a good argument. That's a good argument.
And how many people are in the positions I'm in?
Yeah.
So,
well, how did you get that? I mean, again, not Congressman Knight. Kudos to him for his service, but certainly that is a powerful position to be in, to be vice chair. Is that correct? And you're, 60 days into this.
Well, listen, I told you all from when I started running is that the way that you influence things, the way that you are able to be effective is to get into leadership. You want to be at the decision-making table. You want to be, you don't want to just be a soldier. You want to be one of the people who are at the top, able to kind of move the ship, right? Move things in the general way that we feel like they need to go. And, how did I become the executive director of one of the largest organizations in California by the time that I was 26 years old? It's the same way, right?
Yeah, it makes me feel very, very, very.
But it's, I don't have an easy answer for that without sounding like I'm just stroking myself off, right? Like there's just you go in, you be as effective as possible. I don't know what to say about like what people see in you.
I would attribute a lot of it to just a confidence in yourself. I mean, you seem to just know what you're capable of, and you exude it.
Well, and I would say
I'm also. That's the case, or
I would agree with that. I also think that we know our own strengths and our talents, and I'm not a policy wonk, right? Like that's not what I went in here to do. I came in with leadership experience, knowing that I'm a good leader, and that when it comes down to it, I can mobilize teams, I can mobilize people, I can see the sort of strategic direction that I think things need to go in, and that and what it takes to get there, and kind of what those missing pieces are, and organizing people is one of the key pieces to that, right? So you're talking about a caucus of half of Congress, a little bit over half of Congress. And trying to balance, and I think this is where my lane is, I guess, in Congress, is trying to balance a caucus of very progressive people like AOC, all the way to the people in those Trump districts, like I talked about, and I'm in that kind of middle lane. And how do we make our caucus as effective as possible, fully representing the entire United States as much as possible, so that we're not just this partisan thing. But I think that and then also working with our Republican colleagues. But I truly believe that so many of the Republicans in Congress right now are not representative of the United States as a whole. And I think that because of gerrymandering and because of, the way that Trump has taken the party in a not good direction, I think that is going to die off. And, I think that there will always be a space for people more conservative than I am, but that's not what that looks like right now. And so you've got this, but I think that there are people there who are more reflective of the Republican kind of concept that I grew up with, and I think that that's going to, I feel like I kind of see that space for me of trying. I want nothing more than government to work, and you're always going to have people who are pushing to the left. That's their job within an effective democracy. People who are pulling to the right, that's their job within an effective democracy. And then hopefully, that counterbalances, and you find people who are trying to kind of work that center and say, all right, this is compromise.
You've always struck me as more than anything else pragmatic. Regardless of your views, you recognize the need to work with the other side to get something done.
And I think the reason I got put in a leadership position on Oversight is because leadership, and it's never just Nancy Pelosi, right? Like she's, and I think to her credit, she's a very inclusive leader, and I think that's why she's been able to stay in this kind of a position for so long. So I think that she saw something about how I can, if we want to do our jobs well, as Congress, as Democrats who now have the majority, we need to deal with the potential crimes that have been committed in the White House and this whole polarizing nature of Donald Trump in a way that is as nonpartisan as possible, and that is really focused on the security of our country, the integrity of our democracy, and what's most effective for not just what's most effective, but what is actually going to deliver for the American people. And if we have politicians at every level that are accountable to the people. And so I think that they're looking to me to be able to help balance that. And I would say that, the Chairman Cummings has that. And they wanted someone else who can help support that. And that's something that I'm, committed to.
Before we get into some of the policy stuff, and I in particular really want to talk about Oversight Committee, but I do want to ask you, some of the criticisms I've been intrigued with have been more from the left than from the right about you. For the right, when they complain to me, because you've been on my show, they know I know you. They're like, I'm like, well, what do you expect? She is a Democrat. There are some things she's going to vote for that you're not going to agree with. But there are some on the left that some former FOIA supporters that did vote for you. But I mean, my favorite quote is one person who said, "Well, we are watching her." Mm-hmm. Another person said you had already sold out. Exactly. But I wonder how you handle that kind of criticism to those kind of people. Not that it sounded like they were terrible people. It's not. They're passionate. But, how do you handle that kind of criticism? Does it bother you or does it concern you?
No. I mean, you can't not be in this job if you can't take criticism. Yeah. Well, I would say, like, what specifically are the complaints? I mean, they certainly haven't reached out to me about them. But I think a couple things. One is, and I said this all along throughout the campaign, is that when I get elected, I'm representing the entirety of our district, including the people who didn't vote for me. Yeah. So I have to vote and act in the way that I think is representative of that, and that's not always going to be. It's not always going to be to the far left. It's probably rarely going to be to the far left. And so I have to find a way of reflecting the values that I campaigned on. I mean, I signed on for Medicare for All, which is arguably about as progressive as it comes. Yeah. But I'm also going to end up voting probably for high defense funding. Yeah. And, there are going to be plenty of people who don't like that. I think that there are going to be a lot. The way that I keep thinking about it is that if I piss off people from both sides and one day Fox News loves me and the next day MSNBC loves me, then I'm doing something right. So, I think that, that's the nature of it, is that people are going to be happy with you one day and mad at you the next, and it's okay.
You do prefer me over Brian Williams, though, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay. One other criticism that someone who was at your town hall that I moderated, he voted for you based on that town hall appearance.
Which one?
Okay, and he's a conservative, and he has been upset because you never said anything and had no comments on Corporal Ronald Singh. I'm probably pronouncing that name wrong. I believe a police officer that was murdered by an immigrant.
So we actually, I remember that very well, and I had talked to my dad and my father-in-law about it when it happened. Yeah. And it was in the middle of the immigration debate and everything, and I actually had sent comments to my team to post on social media. And something happened right after, and I cannot remember what it was, but it ended up basically being like back-to-back things, and it ended up getting overshadowed. Yeah. But it was, it's a tragedy. Anytime a law enforcement officer is injured or killed in the line of duty is completely, it's devastating, and I know that from being part of a law enforcement family. So the fact that I actually had said something that, because by the time that whatever happened, I can't remember. The news cycle is so fast these days. I asked my team about it the next day, because again, I'm not on social media. I asked my team about it the next day, and I was like, "Did we post about Officer Singh, Corporal Singh?" And they said no. And by that point, it almost seemed it was strange to go back to.
Right.
And,
I can see that.
And so it was anyway. Yeah, it was one of those things that in the crazy news cycle we didn't, but it's absolutely something I'm aware of, and it's one of those things where you think about it a lot. Of there are things that happen that don't easily fit into a narrative, right? Yeah. They don't fit into what's easy politically to kind of deal with, and that's one of them, right? I mean, he was killed by an illegal immigrant, right? But I'm trying to find that balance of saying that we need to be a place where we believe in immigration, where we want to be a accepting and kind of supportive, but at the same time we need to keep out dangerous criminals. We need to be able to deport dangerous criminals, and it's not easy. So it's and that I think is one of the tragic instances. Sure. But when I talked to my dad and my father-in-law about it, they both said, like, it doesn't matter who it is, right? Yeah. Like, it's the same, officers are shot and killed. Yeah. Whoever shoots and kills them. By Americans exactly. So, we shouldn't let that support a narrative one way or the other.
Yeah, I got you.
No.
Yeah. Before we get into more specific stuff about some of the bills and things that have been going through and the Oversight Committee, tell me about meeting Trump.
Oh, uh-huh.
I mean, what was that like? I mean, you're not a supporter of him, and I mean, I think I've said to you, I've met him.
Yeah.
A long time.
Have?
I did meet him when I was PA, and he was doing a special appearance on the Drew Carey Show.
Oh, wow.
And my biggest memory of him was that he's tall and that he had 3 lines and he needed cue cards. And one of his lines was hello. So, that's my big memory of meeting funny. Donald Trump. And I remember someone getting a picture with him saying, he could be president one day. And I'm like, that's never going to happen.
Oh, I mean, it's such a short interaction, right? Like, I mean, I was a bit taken aback when he said, "I've been watching you." That's for sure.
Did he say it kind of creepy, like?
I didn't see it as creepy.
Yeah.
I think I'm like 95%
he may have meant it as flattering. I mean,
I think because he said that so I'm standing, there's like kind of the line of us in the order of seniority or whatever for the greeting of and walking out of the president. And so I'm talking to one of my colleagues, and he comes up from behind, and I was actually expecting him to come from the other way. And so she's facing me, my colleague's facing me, and she looks over my shoulder, and I see her face react, and so I start to turn around, and she says, "Hi, Mr. President," and sticks out her hand to shake his hand or whatever, and I'm like, oh, I guess he's there. And so I turn around, and he, and then I go to shake his hand or whatever, and I'm like, I'm Katie Hill, you remember from California. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I've been watching you," and shakes my hand. A couple things I remember from the shake. It's a very normal handshake. It was not like, because you've seen some of the pictures where he's like trying to pull you in or whatever. Weird, and it was not. It was just a totally normal handshake. And then that he, it was just a very normal interaction. And then then you go through the photo line or whatever. And I had to think about the photo line, right? Because some people stepped out. Mind you, the people who stepped out are now presidential candidates. They were the senators, they're now presidential candidates, so I can see why they didn't take the photos. But, I was like, okay, I'm going to take the picture with him. I'm not going to, I think it's just rude not to, right? And I guess if you're running for president and you're going to run for president against him, you don't take a photo with him.
Right.
But then I went through it, and, I shook his hand for the photo again or whatever, and he's like, "Keep up the good work." And I'm like, this must be before he's seeing me on the Oversight Committee. So, I don't know how because again, he's seen me in the Fox appearances, and I was the White House used me as an example of a what do they call me? Like a sane Democrat or something like that. When I was, something to that effect.
Wow.
And so, I think, again, you never know who is... People are going to like you one day and not like you the next.
Yeah.
And, that's how it goes. But, he has a certain... look, you don't become president unless you have a certain charisma. And you can see it. You can see that. So.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about the Oversight Committee hearing. And I still think you should have opened it with something like, what happens, happens, what is said, is said. But you did get a lot of kudos for your questions on... how did you come up with the questions? I mean, was it, again, a cynic told me, a Democrat actually, the other night said, "I bet you that the Democrats got together and it wasn't her choice for the questions. It was just delegated among them of who's going to ask what." It's
so funny because I think people have this image that like there's some master plan or people in charge.
Right.
It's like herding cats. I mean, you have 435 people who are who don't have a boss. I mean, there's sort of it's elected leadership, and so you think about that. There's no person in charge. All the people who are in charge have to get reelected by their peers again each time, and so it's not.
You chose your questions then.
Oh yeah, so let me go back to kind of the process. So the staff on the Oversight Committee are incredible because, again, I told you all the things that every member is trying to balance. We all have multiple committees. We are all accountable to our constituents. We've got the casework. We've got to be, whatever. So I can't be going through the entire written testimony and I'm not a lawyer, right? So you have staff that help kind of navigate all of that. They do the pre-interview questions. They're kind of figuring it all out, going through the evidence and everything. And so they come up with a whole slew of information that they sort of help to kind of go through. And and they come up with like different lines of things that, you know, we as a committee want to try and make sure we cover.
Right.
And then we had a pre-strategy hearing strategy meeting where all of us as members of the committee met and talked about like, okay, these are some of the things that we want to cover. Like, I want to cover this kind of thing. And then the staff sort of helped us individually craft the questioning lines that we wanted to focus on. Yeah. And so, you know, upon consulting with my team and consulting with the committee staff, and you know, the thing that I wanted to make sure that I hit on was a crime committed while in office. Yeah. And so they helped me come up with the kind of, you know, like pull the quotes that I that I ended up reading and sort of, you know, create like an effective line of questioning.
What was your impression of Cohen? I mean, you know, the Republicans kept that one line of he's a perjurer, you know, he's a liar. And that's all they've said over and over and over again. We can't trust him. I just have to say, I can't get over this. Like, they keep saying he's a convicted liar. He was lying for the president. Like, how can you just keep going back to this point? He was lying for the president. Now he's not lying for the president. Like, what? How do you reconcile this without, like, I mean, it's just, whatever. Blows my mind. Did you find it to be, did you believe his testimony then?
I did, yeah. I don't see a reason for him to be lying anymore. I see a lot of reasons for him not to be lying anymore. I think he made, like, commentary that was not necessary or helpful, right? Like, I don't actually think that there was any particular reason for him to go into whether Trump was a racist or not, because as far as I'm concerned, we can all see that for ourselves. Yeah. It doesn't matter what he does behind closed doors, because he does it out in the open. So, you know,
it's so blatant sometimes that people ignore it.
So I don't think that there are things like that I didn't think he needed to do. And, you know, especially because whatever. There was the commentary that I didn't think was helpful. I would have rather there was just the focus on, like, what are the things that he did that we wouldn't have known about before, that there's now evidence that we wouldn't have known about before. So, you know, there's that kind of disgruntled employee part of character.
Let me ask you a question. I'm sure you are asked many times, but I'm going to lead it to something else. But, I mean, is he on his way to being impeached?
Well,
you've had been asked that before.
Actually not in that exact wording.
Well, yay.
I mean, listen, we're gonna have to see where everything takes us.
Yeah. But, you know, I mean, here's what I was thinking about the other day, and I don't know how many people have thought about this, but I mean, the one thing I hear over and over again from senators, from congressmen, congresswomen, or whatever is, let's wait until the Mueller report comes out. Let's wait till the Mueller report comes out. But to me, it's almost like the Mueller report seems to be holding back doing anything. Not the report itself, but anybody doing something, because they're waiting for the report. But certainly when you look at the emoluments clause, the situation with the checks and the payoffs and stuff like that, if the Mueller report wasn't there, if it didn't exist, if there would be enough already to say, you know what I mean?
And I think where you see the hesitation is because you're right. I mean, as far as I think, if you just look at the law and whether he's broken the law, he has. Yeah. And I think that that's pretty indisputable at this point. So whether we move forward on impeachment, I think that impeachment is as political as it is anything else. Yeah. And what I think the challenge is that for us to actually impeach somebody, you need, and to get somebody out of office, you need Republicans to do it. Yeah. And for it to not backfire in a huge way, it can't look like it's partisanship. It has to be something where there's the buy-in and the will of the American people at the same time as there is of the people who represent them. Right. And so right now we have Democrats, right? We have Democrats who, for the most part, are in agreement that this man is unfit to be in the White House. And I'll say that. I think he's unfit to be in the White House. I think that he has.
Let's hope he's not watching you now.
Huh? Honestly, I'll probably end up saying that on the news at some point. Because I'm sure people are going to see this and they're going to ask me about it. But I think that he is. But he still has a strong base of support, and the Republicans are even. And I hear what they say when they're not on camera. They are not supportive of him. A lot of them are not supportive of him in the same way, but they're afraid because he has such a strong base. And when you think about their districts, the way that they are, the way that they're gerrymandered, and the way that they are, the way that they are, that they can be primaried. Yeah. They're afraid of Donald Trump, and so they act accordingly. And so until that chips away, and until people, no matter what your political affiliation is, recognize how this truly is about our democracy and what we leave to our children, and whether or not we are moving towards a dictatorship, we are moving towards allowing, crimes to be committed in the Oval Office and have people who are not accountable and are better than or above the law, then it doesn't matter what we do. And in fact, it can actually have a negative effect.
Let's back up just something, because you said something there, just a key word that I just want to clarify, that you said on our way to a dictatorship. Clarify what you mean by that.
So there's this rise of dictatorships and authoritarianism kind of across the globe. And if you see who Trump is courting, it is strongmen. It's strongmen across
who have blind faith in them.
Yes, and that do things over time that chip away at democracy. And I think one of the first things that you see on the way to an authoritarian regime is attacking the press. Yeah. It's undermining elections, free elections, and it's being okay with this hacking that has happened, and that we know for a fact that his own Department of Defense and executive branch says for a fact has happened, and again, attacking the free press over and over and over again. That is exactly what are the first steps towards an authoritarian regime. It does,
just as a storytelling situation, it does kind of make sense in the way that a TV reality star is like the last person you would expect to become an autocrat. I know. You know what I mean? But it creeps up on you.
Well, and you think about, and it's not a story that's unheard of before in history. You need somebody to get to an authoritarian regime, and I'm not at all suggesting that's what's going to happen, right? Because I believe in our democracy, and I believe that the reason we had the election we did in 2018, and the people who have come into office, is that we will. The democracy and the way that we set up with the systems of checks and balances is so that it works, and that somebody can't do that, and that's what's beautiful about America. Right. But if that means that I'm a one-term member of Congress because people don't like it that we hold them accountable, then so be it. I did my job in history, and did I come here wanting to impeach? No, that's the last thing I wanted to do. But if I have to, I will. Yeah. And do I think it's moving in that direction? I absolutely do.
What's next after Cohen's testimony? I mean, are we looking at bringing? I wrote the names down: Weisselberg, Pecker, Matthew Calamari, Roger Stone. Are we looking at bringing any of these people in for questioning? Or
I'm not the one who ultimately makes the decision, but I think that we're certainly looking at all of that, and so we'll be talking as a committee and looking at the next set of subpoenas soon. And again, you try and get witnesses to come in without a subpoena first. Right. That's the preference. But
well, the big news was Jared Kushner and the situation with the security access. Oh God. It sounded like that they are already drawing lines. The White House about the request for for our audience. John Kelly apparently wrote an internal memo because he was so upset about the idea of Jared and Don White, the attorney whose name his name is someone's screaming right now about, like, I know who that is, but about writing internal memos saying they were so concerned about Jared Kushner having that high security clearance, and then Trump has denied that he did anything, but it's come out that he did. Yep. It sounded like Chairman Cummings was pissed. Yeah. I mean, for lack of a better way, and the White House is already, daring you guys to step over the line. What's going to happen?
I can't predict. What I do know is that Chairman Cummings is in no way doing this for partisanship. He is he truly believes in that we have an obligation to our democracy, and I believe the same thing. And I think you're going to see people like us who, frankly, are putting I don't want to say I don't care about re-election, because I think that I have something to offer that extends beyond 2 years. But if if this is something that is because it's politically, dangerous, that makes it so that I lose re-election, then that doesn't change my obligation. I mean, you do swear an oath. And I think that the fact that people on the other side of the aisle, and even possibly on my own side of the aisle because they're afraid of losing re-election, don't act, then they are betraying that oath of office. And I'll say that flat out.
How are you getting along with, Mark Meadows, Jim Jordan? What comes to your mind when you hear names like that? So
it's so funny because, like, in person, I mean, Mark Meadows sponsored my first bill.
Yeah.
And he's a total gentleman in person. Like, we have great exchanges. We chat with each other in the hearing.
I think it's great to hear that. I mean,
It's just that, like, and Jim Jordan, we had a nice conversation. He's got friends that live in, I think he said Ventura. He came out and, so he knows, like, our part of town a little bit. And so I think it's an interesting, it's a very weird dynamic when you have very, like, collegial, nice discussions with people on the other side of the aisle, like even friendships in some cases.
Right.
But then you're just like, you want to strangle them for, like, the way that they vote on things. And I haven't figured out how to wrap my mind around it. I think in some ways it's kind of like the political arguments you have with friends here, that you're just like, how are we not seeing this in the same way?
Yeah.
So I don't know. What I'm trying to figure out is, we're in the early stages of this. Over the next, year and a half, I think we're going to see how it progresses. But I want to know if they're going to be able to put away political fears to do what's right for our country.
Why haven't you been a supporter of the Green New Deal?
I think that I like the idea of it, but I'm a pragmatist. That's in my brand. And I think there are some real problems with what has been
like what? I mean, what are the problems with it?
So I use this as an example. But one of the things is that it says flat out that every single building in America needs to be retrofitted or moving forward to be 100% sustainable. I've worked in housing development. I've worked in the construction industry. It's not possible.
I got to disagree with you on that. And you know why? Because when the ADA passed, that was a similar argument that was put forth that you can't get every building ADA compliant. But for the most part, that's happened since then, since the passing of it. I mean, tell me I'm wrong. I mean, we had a whole process that rolled out with the ADA, and to be honest, I support the ADA 100%, but I had a hard time with how it was an unfunded mandate. I think that we put the burden on small businesses and on industry in a way that was not fair, as far as I'm concerned. And I think that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have made it a requirement, but it also means that we should have funded it. And when you, at least in part, and we didn't do that. And so if you're doing this same kind of a requirement, then we shouldn't put that burden onto families. Onto, when you're talking about every building in America, we shouldn't put it onto small businesses. We shouldn't put it onto, cities to make their, municipalities completely feasible in that way. So anyway, there's that piece of it. I think that the other piece is that the timeline is not realistic. Okay.
I think that there are, I think when you're talking about legislation related to climate change, and it's funny because I get into the details of things, and it was the same thing that I had to get my process on Medicare for All, where you have people say, like, you have to just sign, stand for the big idea, and people don't care about the details, and I'm like, that's fine, but we should. You elected us to care about the details. Right. And when I was talking earlier about the left and the right pushing us in one direction or another, it's AOC's job to push us as far left as she can go. It's people in her district's job to push us as far left as she can go. It's my job to figure out, okay, with those values in mind that we don't disagree with, I do agree with those values, that we should work to save our planet, that we have to be aggressive about the timetable in which we do it, that we need to figure out how to get there. But it's my job to try and figure out the balance between that, recognizing that she's kind of she and that entire group are laying a marker in the sand, and we've got to try and get as close as we can to that.
She has recently talked about creating a list of people that if they don't get in line with certain things.
So that was actually, it's so funny because that you're talking about what has come out in the last day or so.
Yeah.
I was cracking up about the coverage around that because I was there for that whole thing, right? Like the whole thing that went down with the motions to recommit and that meeting that they were talking about and so on and so forth. And the coverage of it was totally
blowing it out of proportion.
Yeah. So what they were talking about, when you're in on the floor, there are computers that post the way people vote about things, and you can print out. There are people at the back that are part of the whips team that can print out the way that Democrats vote in a certain way, like as it's a rolling thing, so that if you're tracking the votes, you have to figure out like, okay, we need to make sure so and so voted, or like we're close to losing this. So someone who was wavering in between, like someone needs to go up to talk to him and say like, hey, can you switch your vote? And recognizing the political dynamics of it, etc. So anyway, this motion to recommit issue is one that is becoming more and more of a challenge for us as Democrats because of those people that I talked about who are in Trump districts or who are in really tough districts who are trying to get their score. They're basically not voting with the party score as high as possible. And so they'll vote for Republican motions to recommit. And what the motion to recommit does on the Republican side is it gives them control of the floor. It basically, in many cases, can pull the bill from the floor, or it can put in a provision that is not what we want. And they do it under a guise of something that can get a good headline of, for example, we just want to report criminals to ICE, or we just want to, make sure that sex offenders can't get something. But it's actually it's a total BS kind of move. And in fairness, Democrats did it too while we were in office, and us as candidates, not even knowing better. Those were some of the things that you say, pulling up just some of the claims that you use, like, they voted, or they voted for against such and such, which is really a Democratic MTR that was put up that you kind of are forcing your hand on. Difference is Republicans, lockstep, vote against the MTR, saying that it is a procedural vote. And you heard Knight say that over and over again. It's a procedural vote. It's a procedural vote. It's a procedural vote. And Democrats are not sticking to that. And so what it does is it puts people like me who are voting against it as a procedural vote, which it is, in hot water, because then it makes it look like it's not really a procedural vote. And so the Signal wrote a thing about this. They said that I remember
they said that you voted not to, if I remember correctly,
pay federal workers. Pay federal workers. And so then one of my colleagues on this last one got slammed for voting no on the last MTR because he was the only one in his state from these new districts that voted against it. And so it puts those of us who know that we should vote against it because we don't want to give them control, or it's a bad provision, or we know the long-term consequences of it. It puts us in a really tough position. So we got into and the reason this one in particular was bad is that now twice the Republicans have had success with a motion to recommit that is based on an immigration vote, immigration related. And so now what they can see is that if you're putting in something that is anti-immigrant, then you're gonna pull away a lot of Democrats because it's this whole polarizing issue that we've been dealing with. And so you see people who are part of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, people who are from very left-leaning districts, and even frankly people like me who just think it's a bunch of crap to be pulling that kind of stuff. Where you are now putting it in a position that every time we try to pass an important piece of legislation, they are going to pull an MTR that is somehow trying to tie it back to immigration. And then what happens? It could literally, this was related to background checks, and they could do that for anything. So, what are we going to do about that? And there's not a good answer for it. And so what AOC did is there was a whole string. This was a meeting. This was a
by the way, I was looking for a yes or no.
Oh no, this is important. This is something that I'm very
go for it. I'm good with it. I was just
so what AOC did was so there was a whole string of people that were passionately talking about this. Like the caucus is very upset about this. And they were talking about it, and you have these two microphones in the room where people line up and they say their piece about it. And AOC spoke about it, and she said that basically a bunch of us got the list of the people who voted with the MTRs because we need to go talk to them. We need to be like, hey, how are we going to resolve this?
Right.
And she basically said she's going to tell activists who those people were because the Moms Demand, how good of activists those Mom Demand folks are.
Yes.
And her point was that listen, we can't protect you from from these very effective activists if you're because it could have killed that bill.
Yeah.
And we're lucky that it didn't.
Yeah.
So she said something like that, but she did not create a list.
There was
a list.
Even MSNBC was promoting it.
I know.
Like that, so
it's one of those funny things. The narrative.
And then the other thing I was curious about is you have come out for Medicare for All. One of the things you got some grief during the campaign against some of your primary challengers about the fact that you were being pragmatic about. And I remember very specifically saying it's not the issue of supporting Medicare for All. It's the issue of how are we going to pay for it.
Yep.
And on the Green New Deal, you just talked about paying for it. How are we going to pay for Medicare for All? What is your thought on that? If you're going to come out for that now, have you figured out a way to pay for it?
Yeah. So first of all, a few things. Again, remember how I was talking about this whole laying the marker, right? The Medicare for All package is laying the marker, right? It's saying that we believe that every single person in the United States should be able to have health care that they can afford, that covers everything, that is not, that it's never going to leave them in a position where they have to declare bankruptcy or choose between putting a roof over their head and paying their medical bills.
Sure.
This is a sidebar for a second, but it's a very telling story. One of my staff members during the day of the oversight stuff, I was getting all this attention, et cetera. I don't want to call anyone out by name, but her parents were very proud of her. And she said, her mom called her and said, "Oh my God, I'm so proud of you, honey. I just called Henry Mayo and I paid off your medical debt. Like I paid off your however many hundreds of dollars that she still owed."
Yeah.
And like that was the I'm so proud of you, honey. Like, I mean, not like I sent you, whatever. Like my mom buys me clothes. Like that's her. And then she called her like later in the day because I did well on something else. She's like, "Do you have any dental bills?" Like, I mean, that is messed up, right? That's our system. And so anyway, so there's the Medicare for All package kind of lays out like this is how it should be. It's recognized, widely recognized, that it doesn't have a pay for written into it, and that's the part we're putting it out there to start having that conversation and to say that we have to have that conversation to figure out.
Well, I mean, why not do the same with the Green New Deal, though?
I think you can, and I think that resolution has gone, has started that conversation, right? What we didn't finish saying, because I go off on these sort of rants, but is that that's a resolution, and in that resolution it included too many other things that I don't think are related enough to climate change. Right. And so if there's a revised resolution that is more specific to climate change, then I'm all for it. I'm figuring it out, right? Like there's going to be at some point there's legislation. I'm on the in Oversight. I'm on the environmental subcommittee. There's going to be an evolving process that goes forward with this. Yeah. I just felt like I had too many things within that resolution that need to be fixed. Yeah. Just like last cycle, there was HR 676 that I couldn't get on board with because it had too many problems with it, but I was okay with this Medicare for All version. Even though it still needs a pay for, I like a lot more of what the bill says. I think Green New Deal 2.0, when it's not just a resolution, but it's an actual package, I'll probably sign on to. Okay. But so, this is the marker. It's the pay for. I think that there are a number of different things that have been laid out around it that it boils down to people, corporations, and the wealthiest people in our country, which we say over and over again, need to be paying their fair share. Yeah. And then in the meantime, the pieces of legislation that I've signed on to are much more likely to get a vote and possibly even be taken up by the Senate are, for example, it's basically creating a Medicaid buy-in option that states can create. So California could do a Medicaid buy-in option. Okay. It's that public option that never ended up making it. Makes sense. There's a bill that I'm going to be introducing that actually some of our constituents here locally helped to create, which is addressing the Medicare Part B, some of the Medicare Part B problems. So at least for seniors, we're having some options. There's another option that would be reducing the age, that would be lowering the age for Medicare to 55. That actually solves a whole lot of problems related to the ACA. That is not done yet, but it's in process. So I'm about, here's the marker, but in the meantime, we've got to find those intermediary fixes.
We're running out of time, so I'm going to try and hit on these last points really quickly as much as possible. But you HR 1, the bill on
campaign finance reform.
It was ridiculed by McConnell, literally ridiculed by him. And I thought it was a good bill. But even how does that make you feel when you know something like that is, if it makes it to the Senate, you've got the speaker, the majority leader making fun of it at that point. I mean, did you get frustrated at that kind of stuff, or?
It's not surprising, so it's hard to get frustrated. Now that things are recorded, you probably just saw my eye roll. So
we'll cut away.
It's okay. I think that we knew that HR 1 as a package was not something that's probably going to get taken up by the Senate.
Yeah.
But there are parts of it that I think are more likely to be taken up by the Senate. And so that's why actually there are parts of it that are getting broken out individually to get sent to the Senate separately. And I'm co-sponsoring a whole bunch of those.
Yeah.
I'm co-sponsoring. I'm a co-sponsor on the whole thing. But I think that, again, it says this is what Democrats are for.
Yeah.
This is what we believe in, and I think that's what the American people want.
Yeah.
So the fact that he's ridiculing it, to me, shows how far out of step he is. Not
been
the
there
other
a
way
long
around.
time.
Yes, exactly. And also it shows you what kind of an institution he wants to keep and what kind of a power dynamic he wants to keep.
Yeah.
So to me, this is what people need to be paying attention to.
Yeah.
And if you don't like that, if you think these are good reforms, and polling shows it, that the vast majority of Americans believe that corporations should not have as much power, that special interests should not have as much power, that politicians should have to listen to the American people, and that regular voters should be able to have more of a say in the political process through something like, a matching fund for public finance, or for individual small dollar donations. Right. And so much more, right? Like, this is a great package of a whole ton of reforms that, I started, before I knew about any of this stuff, I started saying that I'm running because our political system is broken. HR 1 takes critical steps to fix that.
Yeah.
And if you believe that, and people got on board with my campaign, across the aisle, because they believe that our political system is broken, and you find somebody who is ridiculing that whole idea, then, to me, you gotta go. Okay. So I see people... You should vote them out. You should vote him and any other senator, frankly, any other member who doesn't agree that political reforms need to happen should go.
I want to talk a little bit about H.R. 8 because the moms will be mad at me if I don't.
Sure.
That's a big deal, the background checks thing. Do you think it's going to pass through the Senate? Do you think Trump will sign it?
I think that, again, this is something that is supported by the vast majority of Americans. The Republicans are going to, and have already tried to, make it something that is, they're trying to pretend like there's problems with it that are not there. And one thing that I've found remarkable, and where I think, you hear about Democrats like having some of the messaging problems. Yeah. We don't have messaging problems. We have problems lying. And we have problems like just totally rolling with untruths. They don't. They will literally just make stuff up and run with it. And if you're not okay with that, like how do you compete with that?
Right.
But so anyway, they're making pieces up completely about it, and that's what we're going to have to overcome. And frankly, I have never been more impressed with an activist group than I am with Moms Demand and with the whole movement around gun legislation. And so if ever there was somebody I believed in to be able to get this to pass and to put the political pressure on to pass the Senate, it's them. So when I talk about, I think that they'll be able to put that visibility on to say that these are the senators who are saying that they don't want to keep our kids safe, and that the most basic reform of universal background checks is too much for them because of the gun lobby. What do you think? What do you think should happen to those people? Gone.
Yeah. Okay. Then you the bill on the St. Francis Dam Memorial. That's an accomplishment too. So I mean, you want to tell us about the bill, or just?
I mean, it was one that, to Steve Knight's credit, he laid the foundation for, and as soon as we got in, we knew that a lot of that work had been done on it, so we didn't want to lose any of the momentum on it. And so, as a team, we said, okay, what are the top priorities for the district, the local priorities that we can start working on? So, none of them are surprising, right? CMEX, the St. Francis Dam, Santa Susana, Aliso. St. Francis Dam was the one that had the most, had already had the most progress, and so we wanted to pick that ball up and keep going. And so my team reached out to, we looked at what was already there. We reached out to Senator Harris's office, who had also been working on it, Brownlee's office, who had been working on it, and just picked it up and kind of figured out what the best next steps were. And so introduced it, got it to be part of this bigger package, because whenever you're trying to do something that's local and the rest of the country wouldn't have any reason to care about. You got to kind of insert it into something bigger. And so that's why relationships are so important, and that's why those, the leadership, kind of leverage that you've got, and the fact that committee staff and that leaders of committees, like that's how you're able to get things done for your local community.
Okay, now Angela, don't worry, we're almost done. But I do want to. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about CMAX. Or CMAX. Yeah. Mike Devlin will correct me on pronunciation, but what's going on with that?
So what we're working on too is it's basically stuck it's stuck in a stupid place where I actually think I have some power with Oversight, and we're trying to navigate that exactly. There's this review board that is looking at the appeal that CMAX put in after the Bureau of Land Management revoked their permits. And so they haven't done anything for like 3 years. So we're trying to see if through Oversight I can force them to do something with it. So the team's working on that right now. That's one of those things where it's like trying to find the information of even who to talk to is not nearly as easy as you'd think. But we're working on it, and that's actually, I think, that's a win that I want to try and get as quickly as I can. Okay, great.
Here's an odd question for you, maybe. You're a millennial. You wear that with a badge of honor. Certainly accomplished a lot already in your life. I mean, what is the secret to success? I mean, what for you? I mean, what would you say has allowed you to achieve what you've achieved so far?
Well, there's never one thing, right? I mean, a strong support network is the key for anybody, I think. Well, people overcome a lot, right? And can be incredibly successful without that. But for me, I know that I've been successful in large part because of my family and my husband. It's funny just thinking of the things that that I haven't had to worry about that other people have is pretty humbling. So aside from that, aside from the fact that I've been completely blessed and lucky to have a family and loved ones that have helped me get here. I think there's, for me at least, in terms of the focus and the direction, you have to have something that guides you. And the thing that guides me is that mission. It goes back to the mission of what are you trying to do? And it cannot be I'm trying to be as successful as possible, or I want to make a lot of money, or whatever that might be. And if that's what you want, if that's the way that you want to live your life, I'm not judging you for that. No. But for me, that doesn't work. It has to be something that's bigger than that. And I think it sounds really cheesy, but it's about trying to leave the world a better place than it was when you got here. And I think that my family, in large part, kind of instilled that in me. And it goes back to this whole service mentality. And each member of my family has done it in their own way in terms of leaving that mark. And for me, it's my life path has kind of taken me here. And I don't know why, but you have that drive and that focus of taking the talents that you've been given and using them to their maximum effect to try and achieve that objective. And really trying, I think the most important thing somebody can do is to really take stock of what you're good at and use that to its max. And for me, what I figured out is I'm good at strategic thinking and I'm good at leadership. And so that's what kind of took me here.
I gotcha. Okay. Well, let's have some fun.
Okay.
First off, will you come back and see us maybe in 6 months?
Absolutely.
Okay.
This is my favorite.
Oh, I love it. And I'm going to get you to commit right now if I can. When the election rolls around and the Republicans have a nominee, will you commit to a debate on the Talk of Santa Clarita?
Yes, with one caveat.
What's the
caveat?
If it's
a totally crazy person, then I don't think you should dignify them with a debate.
Okay.
So, if I have polling that shows that people aren't even taking them seriously, then I don't think you should dignify them with a debate.
You know what? That's fair. That is fair. Okay. Are you gonna see Captain Marvel?
I didn't even know it was coming. That's how out of touch I am with anything pop culture, but I would love to, now that I know that it's happening.
Well, since you might be talking to Roger Stone soon, he is famous for having a Richard Nixon tattoo on his back.
I thought that was a joke, by the way.
Yeah, I did too.
I really thought that was like one of those fake news things. So.
If you were going to put a tattoo of a celebrity on your back, who would it be?
That would literally never happen. I can't even.
No, come on. Just use your imagination.
Can't even, like, I got nothing for you on that. Like,
I think the Talk of Santa Clarita stick figure would be
perfect.
Okay.
That sounds good.
And do you have a joke for us?
I do.
What's the joke?
What's the difference between baseball and politics?
I don't know what.
In baseball, if you steal, you're out.
Okay. Okay, and the last thing we're trying this is new, so we'll see how this goes over. But things are so partisan these days that my dad thinks the Democrats are evil. The Democrats think the Republicans are evil. I just want to hear your best evil villain laugh. Brilliant. Oh, Congresswoman, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you again in about 6 months or so. Okay?
Thank you. You too.
And keep up the good work.
All right.
We hope you guys enjoyed the talk.
You've been listening to the Talk of Santa Clarita. Listen to us on iTunes, SoundCloud.com, YouTube, and Stitcher. Barring a life event getting in the way, a new podcast is available every Tuesday. Questions, comments, and show ideas can be sent to thetalkofsantaclarita@gmail.com. You can also call or text us at 661-505-8672. That's 661-505-8672. Follow us on Twitter at The Talk of SC or on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at The Talk of Santa Clarita. You can also visit our website by going to www.thetalkofsantaclarita.com. This has been a production of Radio Free Santa Clarita Incorporated, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. To donate, go to radiofreesantaclarita.org/donate. Radio Free Santa Clarita, on the net and on the air, and we're very much aware.
Any questions?